Welcome back everyone. Hi, if you're new, my name is Tori, and today, since it's been a while since I've done a traditional monthly wrap up and since I was just out of pocket for the month of February, I thought I would just sit down now and take you guys through just how my reading year has been so far and share with you my DNFs, some of my current reads, and then some of the books that I've recently finished. I do have a lot of books that I'm going to talk about, so I am going to leave some timestamps down below in case you guys want to skip around between the DNFs, current reads, and that sort of thing. So not trying to make this intro any longer, let's just get right into the video. So let's start with my current reads, the first of which is To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini, and this is the book that I'm going to be tackling for the Tome Topple Readathon. And I picked up this book right when Tome Topple started and only made it about 34 pages into it, and it's still really too early for me to have any initial reactions, initial thoughts to what's going on right now. I'm really indifferent toward the main character so far. She hasn't done anything either way to make me feel any type of way about her, but again, I'm 34 pages in. This is 872 pages, so it is still a really long way to go. But so far what's been happening is we have our main character Kira, who's been on this uncolonized planet with the rest of her crewmates, and they're actually about to leave the planet for and go their separate ways for different missions. But before they leave, Kira's superior approaches her and says, there's a drone that it either malfunctioned or something happened. I think the drone went missing, and he wants Kira to go find out what happened. And so I left off right on that part when she's about to go investigate the drone and figure out what's going on there. But based on the synopsis, when she gets to the site of the drone, I'm guessing there's going to be an ancient relic there that she finds, and that is going to lead to all-out war somehow across the galaxy. So again, a long way to go. I'll keep you guys updated. I'm going to be talking about this a lot in the next couple of weeks. The next book I'm currently reading is one that is actually really surprising me right now. It's still a little too early for me to really know where things are going, but this is good so far, and that's Trouble the Saints, and this is by Alaya Dawn Johnson. I don't know where to start with this. This has been really intriguing so far. I'm on chapter 4, like in the middle of chapter 4, and it takes place in New York in the 1940s, and we're following this main character Phyllis, who she's an assassin, but she's been trying to leave that life behind. And her former handler, her former boss, he sends someone to kind of pull her back into the mix of things, and she's pretty reluctant about it. So that storyline is unfolding right now, but there also seems to be like this magic system that's trying to develop, something to do with people's hands. Phyllis, along with other Black people, have this magical ability that comes from their hands, that their abilities are really seen as something evil and to be shunned in certain parts of the community. But so far I'm loving the atmosphere of this story. It just feels very like smoky and noir and mysterious. It has that kind of vibe going for it, and it's really surprising me. So again, I'm not sure where it's going so far, but hopefully the rest of the book continues to be just as great as the first several chapters that I've read. Next, let's talk about the DNFs. I've DNF'd 2 books so far this year. The first of which was Sword of Kaigen, and this is by M.L. Wang, and I was actually buddy reading this with Shannon from That's So Po, and I will leave a link to Shannon's channel in the description box below for you to check out. I've said this before, I love Shannon's channel, her content, her reviews. They're always just so thorough. Her thoughts are always just so well fleshed out. I think if you enjoy my videos and the type of books I read, I think you'll find some really great content from Shannon, so definitely go check her out. So even though I did DNF this book, Sword of Kaigen is definitely something that I want to return to in the future, because I put it down at a time where I was just going through a reading slump, booktube slump, and I was trying to find a place to live. And I was starting to pack, so it just really got caught up in that whole mix of madness that happened in January, towards the end of January into February. But from what I've read and from what I remember from January, we're following this character, and he comes from a long line of warriors that have defended the empire for generations pretty much, and they all have these really unique elemental abilities that they can pull weapons from water particles in there. I mean, it's really detailed. But one day this outsider arrives at our main character's school and just really shatters his perspective on the empire as a whole and the things that they're fighting for. And from what I remember, our main character was really starting to spiral a little bit, trying to grapple with that information. So that's really as far as I was getting. And we also got another perspective, the perspective of his mother and the fact that she was a warrior back in her day. And I think it was starting to really build to something. So again, I am gonna go back to it, but I had to just put it down temporarily. The next book I DNF'd is one that I'm never gonna go back to, and that is We by Yevegny Zamyatin, and this is a dystopian novel in translation. And I learned that this novel was actually the inspiration for George Orwell to write 1984. In my humble opinion, you should just go read 1984. We have such an interesting concept. I mean, it's the standard dystopian novel. We have this ruling government in the story called One State, and everyone lives in glass houses and is under constant supervision. And instead of names, everybody has numbers. And so we have our main character who's been documenting the things happening in the society for future generations to read. But what makes this society really unique is the fact that it is governed by like logic and numbers and math, and things that people can and can't do are just really boiled down to, basic numbers, pretty much basic science. But our main character tries to follow these rules as best as possible, but he starts to slip up a little when he begins to fall in love with this seemingly promiscuous woman who shows him the darker side of society and tries to turn him into this rebel pretty much. And I thought the concept of this story was just so much more interesting than the actual execution. I just found myself not really interested in what was going on, so I just had to put it down. Now let's get into my recent reads, starting with none other than Ring Shout by P.Djeli Clark. I am just slightly obsessed with P.Djeli Clark's work, and this novella just pretty much solidified that he has become one of my auto-buy authors. I love his work so much. His concepts, his characters, his craft, it's just all so incredible, and it just really culminates, I think, in a novella like Ring Shout. This novella takes place in an alternate version of the Jim Crow South during the time of Birth of a Nation, and the KKK is holding rallies and marches and other nonsense. But the twist in this novella, and it's something that I think only P.Djeli Clark could have come up with, could have written about, is the fact that these demons, these monsters known as Ku Kluxes, inhabit the body of KKK members. And we have this group of monster hunters led by our main character Maurice, who can actually see the Ku Kluxes in the bodies of these Klans members, and they go out and slay these monsters. And it is just, this is an amazing novella. I highly recommend this. The thing that I love about this novella in particular, but just as a whole with P.Djeli Clark's work, he has this amazing way to take supernatural concepts and use them to amplify just some of the darkest parts of our history, and really confront things like racism, not only back then, but how it's still magnified in our society today. And I love this novella so much. The next book I read was one that I actually did not really enjoy at all, and that's The First Sister by Linden A. Lewis, and this is an adult sci-fi novel, the first in a series. And I actually don't want to spend too much time on this because I just feel like I'm just gonna go on kind of a tangent about how much I didn't enjoy this book. But in this, we're following 3 different main characters. We have First Sister, who is a part of this really strict religious order, and kind of akin to something like The Handmaid's Tale, women really have no agency, and they're on the ship and really only used for the pleasure of the soldiers on the ship. And then we have our second perspective, this character named Leto, who is in many ways this disgraced soldier and is having to deal with the consequences of this mission that went wrong that he was a part of. And then in our third perspective, we have this non-binary character named Hero, and we're really getting their perspective through like audio diaries, audio entries. Overall, this book just really didn't do anything for me. Just as I'm reading it, I just really find that I'm not connecting to anything these characters are doing. I don't really care about what these characters are trying to accomplish, and it just started to feel a little bit like a struggle that I was trying to just stay invested in what was happening in the story. And there is a Leto's perspective. My goodness, I was just sighing every single time we arrived back in Leto's perspective. The whole book honestly could have been with Hero or with First Sister. I actually loved Hero's perspective because they come from wealth, and so they really have this way of showcasing how the politics and how the wealth really is corrupted in this world. And so I thought that aspect was fascinating. And then First Sister, just the fact that she doesn't really have any agency, I thought that was really fascinating and could have just been elevated a little bit more. The story just kind of lacked depth for me. The world building in the beginning I thought was really strong, but just again, it didn't really do anything for me as the story progressed. It is also marketed as a space opera, which I would respectfully argue against, but to each their own. And then there's also a romantic element to the story that I had to put the book down. I was like, okay, this just feels a little fast, and no. The next book I read is a sci-fi poetry collection by Tracy K. Smith called Life on Mars, and I enjoyed this overall. Not gonna lie, there are several poems in here that I just was like, what is happening? I didn't even know where to begin trying to interpret what was going on. But from what I could gather from the collection as a whole, there's this running thread of just Tracy K. Smith wondering about our place in the world, space exploration as a whole. Are we alone in the universe? And then there's also this really amazing thread that she has throughout her poems of, you know, the relationship between fathers and daughters. And we also learned that her father worked on the Hubble telescope and what that was like, and that was just fascinating to read about. I do recommend it if you enjoy poetry and if you enjoy sci-fi poetry. But yeah, overall, a good collection of poems. I don't think I have anything too profound to add to the poetry discussion or anything like that, so I think you should check it out though. The next book I read was Home Before Dark, and this is by Riley Sager, and this is actually my second Sager novel. The first I read was Lock Every Door, and I prefer that one. That's not to say I didn't enjoy this book. I did. It was entertaining, but I still think Lock Every Door was a little bit better. We're following this main character named Maggie, and she renovates homes. But when Maggie was 5 years old, her family purchased this house, and they were only in the house 15 days before they fled in the middle of the night. So Maggie's father, he wrote a book about their experiences that they had in the home that eventually made them flee, and the hauntings that were happening to them while they were living there. And the book from there just blows up. It just becomes this cultural phenomenon, something akin to Amityville Horror, and everybody knows the story of the hauntings that they experienced in this house. Everybody knows who Maggie is. They know the characters in the story. It's a big thing in society. So adult Maggie, she just doesn't believe anything in the book. She actually can't even remember living in that house all those years ago because she was so young at the time. But Maggie goes back to the house to fix it up and really to uncover what actually happened in the house to make her family flee all those years ago, and also to try to figure out if her father's story is true or not. What I did really enjoy about the story is the fact that it's told from Maggie's perspective in present day, but the flashback chapters are told from the chapters of the father's book. Things that Maggie kind of muses about in the present day, and just really kind of horrific things that happened to her as a child. We're like, oh, I wonder what happened, and then we flash back to that scene in the father's book, and I thought that was just really well done structure wise. I thought that was cool, and it just really kept the mystery element going throughout the entire book. My only complaints about this book honestly come in the last maybe 100 to 75 pages, or it's not even the way the book ended per se. It's more the fact that it just becomes very Lifetime movie. It just feels kind of cheesy as the closer we get to the end of the book. So, oh my god, I think I've been talking for about 45 minutes, so I need to wrap this up. So we're down to the last two books. The next book I read, this is actually the book that I kicked off 2021 with, and the very first book I finished this year, and that's Heir by Sarah J. Maas, and this is the third book in the Throne of Glass series, and I really enjoyed this book. I had to suffer almost through Throne of Glass and then through Crown of Midnight to get to this book, and to finally figure out what everybody is talking about when they say that the story just completely shifts. And it's so true. Tonally, this book, Heir, just feels completely different, so much more mature emotionally, story-wise than the first two, and I actually really love this. I'm like fully invested in Throne of Glass series right now, and this is coming from someone who DNF'd Throne of Glass years ago. Like, I don't even think I made it past chapter 3 all those years ago. But so just quickly, if you're unfamiliar with Throne of Glass as a whole, the story starts book 1, Throne of Glass. We have our main character Celaena Sardathian, who is an assassin, and she enters this competition to become the king's right-hand assassin pretty much, and that will buy her freedom in a certain number of years, because she's been in this labor camp for like a couple of years or so, something along those lines. But in the process of Celaena trying to win this competition and become the right-hand assassin of the king, we are learning that the king has just wiped magic from the world pretty much, and he's just been implementing this really oppressive form of government. And then in the process of all of that, Celaena's own story and background and history begins to come to light. That comes out more in book 2, specifically at the very end of book 2. It was fun to read. I enjoyed this. So I'm going to continue on and hopefully can get to Queen of Shadows pretty soon. And then finally, I saved the best book for last, you guys. This was excellent. I'm actually still kind of speechless because I love this book so incredibly much, and that is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. If you were thinking about reading this book, if you were on the fence about reading this book, just read it. Borrow it from the library, borrow it from a friend, go buy it, just read it. Do it now. This was amazing. So in this, we have our main character, Bree Matthews, and Bree, she begins this early college program at North Carolina. But when she gets there, she stumbles upon this secret society where these students, a part of the society, call themselves Legendborn. And we find out that these Legendborn students are actually descendants of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Now, 3 months before Bree got to college, her mother was killed in a car accident. As the book progresses and the more she gets to know about this order at North Carolina, the more she begins to wonder if her mother's death was really an accident. And so that really just kind of forces her into the mix of things within the order. But at the same time, Bree is discovering a lot of things about herself that have just been hidden from her entire life. And it is I have goosebumps honestly thinking about this book in some parts. It is excellent. Before this, I had a really just kind of passing, almost poor knowledge of King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table. I could win maybe one question in a trivia game or something if it came down to it, but knew absolutely nothing. But the way that Tracy Deonn weaves that lore, that legend into the fabric of this story, and the way that Bree goes about her self-discovery and how Deonn writes about, especially with young Black women, how Deonn writes about this importance of our ancestors and mothers that came before us and long lines of mothers. I mean, I was actually getting really teary-eyed towards the end of this book. Please go read this. This was amazing. And there are two magic systems that are going on in this book at the same time. We have the magic system of the order, and then we also have another one that I'm not going to talk about because I think that will start to become a spoiler if I go into it too much. But man, this was great. I marked this book up. I have book darts, you guys. I use them all the time when I read, and this is just, I was marking like almost every single it's ripped. Oh my god, my book is ripped. Anyways, I was marking up almost every single page. I will say though, I saw the ending coming. I just had no idea how we were going to get there, and I couldn't have even imagined how we would get there. And it wasn't like a, oh, I saw this coming sort of thing. It was just exciting. And what I love about this, that Tracy Deonn does so well, I love fantasy. I can appreciate a great fantasy when we're dropped into the world and the character that we're following is already well established in that world. They know the world, they know the magic system, all that. But there's something about being dropped in a world as a reader when the protagonist also has no idea what is going on. So it really feels like you are just so close with Bree as she's learning this history and learning about herself. And by the end of it, you just are rooting for her so hard. I loved it. I cannot wait for book 2. Based on the things that they need to do in book 2 and the things that have to be accomplished in the second book, I am just praying that it does not suffer from second book syndrome, because this book was too great for the second one to flop. It was too great. So I am just, go read it. This was phenomenal. Highly recommend. So that is it for me, you guys. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Let me know down in the comments how your reading year has been going so far. If you've picked out any favorites already, any DNFs that you've had, I want to hear about it. And I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.